Good evening, executive colleagues, fellow councillors and officers and guests, and any members of the public watching on the webcast, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Waverley Executive. Can I just run through a couple of housekeeping rules before we get the main meeting underway? Just to remind you that we have 2 fire exits. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so should the fire alarm ring, please do move to the nearest exit, which is either behind you there or to my right here in the corner, and we assemble by our fire assembly point, which is outside Waitrose, where the register can be taken, and once everyone is safely accounted for, you may then depart. We, as I say, aren't expecting a fire alarm, so let's hope that we can move forward with the evening. It is still quite warm, so gentlemen, do feel free, and ladies also, to remove your jackets, should you so wish. That also applies to officers. And we'll move to the main agenda, and the first item is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting that was held on the 5th of June. And if you're in agreement with those executive colleagues, I will sign those as a true record at the end of the meeting. Agreed. Thank you. We have apologies for absence as item 2. Ms Cameron?
Had apologies from Councillor Tom Martin.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest?
None, Leader.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the public?
None, Leader.
Thank you. I believe that we do have a question from Councillor Beeman. Councillor Beeman, would you like to read out your question? And I'm happy to then read the answer so that that's on public record.
Thank you very much, Leader. My question. At the meeting of the JPC on Wednesday the 27th of June, at which planning application WA 2018-0544 was discussed, there was virtually unanimous support, which I personally share, for a 2 rather than single lane access bridge between the A31 and the East Street development site, since this will obviously reduce the potential for any increase in traffic using farms already congested town centre roads, which has consequential effect on air quality. Concern was, however, also expressed from a number of members that Borough Walk would also be used on an albeit temporary basis during the construction of the access bridge. Whilst there was appreciation of this concern, when the question was asked whether any alternative had been considered, the answer given that there was no alternative. There are, however, a number of other possible alternatives that should have been considered, including establishing a temporary entrance/exit to the development site from Dogflood Way into the now closed car park during the period of access bridge construction. Establishing a temporary entrance and exit from Dogflood Way would ensure that there would be no additional HGV movements having to use South Street, as well as avoiding any need to cut back or remove any well-established trees, remove any commemorative benches, or lay down any temporary road service on Borough Walk. Would it therefore be possible, even at this late stage, to investigate using Dogflood Way as an alternative to using Borough Walk? Thank you.
Councillor Beeman, thank you very much for your question, and I'm actually pleased, given that there seems to be a lot of concern about this matter, to try and have the opportunity to give it a bit more clarity. So obviously there was a response given at the actual planning meeting, but this answer now addresses the point as a development partner. And as part of the bridge construction design, all options of construction have been looked at, and that included not using Waverley Walk. The reality, however, of the situation is that Dogflood Way is not a viable alternative to undertake the works on the south side of the river by the A31. This area is already being used to assemble the prefabricated bridge but does not allow access to the other side of the riverbank. Waverley Walk is the only viable access route to construct the elements of works that are necessary on the southern side of the river to install the temporary access bridge that is required. As part of the planning conditions, this area will be fully reinstated at the end of the project. The walkway along Waverley Walk will be reopened once the bridge is constructed and remain open for the duration of the construction of Brightwells. There will be then a further temporary closure of the walkway at the end of the project whilst the bridge is removed. I hope that that helps to clarify the matter and will ensure that this answer is also passed to the various media organisations so that they're clear, having also asked us questions about this over the last few days. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Beeman. So if we now move to item 5, and that's the, item 6, that's the corporate strategy, and that's an item that I'm going to introduce. You will find that that report is on pages 9 to 16 of your agenda, colleagues. And I'm really, really pleased to be introducing the corporate strategy for the next 5 years, the period 2018 until 2023. I think it's absolutely critical that we have a corporate strategy that really does set out very clearly the strategic direction of this council for the next 5 years. And I think we need to face the facts that we face ongoing challenges. The next 5 years are crucial to this council, how we move that on. And it's important for our officers, for our councillors and for the public, should they so wish to sit and actually digest this corporate strategy, to really understand where we as a local authority see our strategy and our direction during the forthcoming years. The strategy itself considers, as I say, the challenges and the changes that are coming before us in local government, and proposes 3 main themes: people, place and prosperity. And I'm sure that those of you here today are very keen, and having worked as we have on this for a number of months with our senior officer team led by Mr Horwood, Louise Norrie and Robin Taylor, and also with help and input from other councillor colleagues and external sources. I think this really does help us to make sure that we're focusing in the right areas to address the various challenges that we're seeing within our towns and villages in Waverley, and for our overall population. And we're building on the feedback from the strategic review to make sure that we have a document in place that is very clear and reflects the aspirations much more clearly and strategically. This will be transposed into our service plans, the annual budget and individual staff performance agreements. So it's absolutely going to cascade right the way through the work of the council. And to ensure that our objectives are achieved, progress is going to be monitored by the executive, the overview and scrutiny committees and our senior management team on a regular basis, because it's absolutely critical that to ensure this moves forward, we are continually measuring this and reviewing this document and measuring the various outcomes from the document. The recommendation before you is to consider the draft strategy and recommend it to Council for approval and adoption. That's set out on page 3 of the agenda, and page 10 of the detailed report that is before you. I am aware that Councillor Bolton will want to speak on this item because we have one area where, upon reflection and on some of the latest data that we've had, we want to make a slight amendment, don't we, Councillor Bolton? But I'll leave you to speak and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The corporate strategy includes a goal to increase our recycling rate to 54%. This is point 3 on page 14 of the agenda papers. In fact, the very latest DEFRA figures show that we are approaching this already, and so we can be more ambitious. Thank you. I would therefore like to move an amendment to the recommendation so that it reads as follows. The Executive recommends to the Council for approval and adoption the draft Corporate Strategy 2018-23 with the following amendment. Place Goal 3, encourage our residents to improve the quality of recycling and the DEFRA recycling rate to 56% by 2023. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton, you'll need a seconder for that. Councillor Hall is pleased to second. Yep. Thank you. Now, does anyone wish to debate that amendment? Any comments at all that you wish to make on that amendment? In that case, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Shall we?
Recommendation as amended. You've accepted the amendment. You now need to debate and then agree. The new.
So, with that in mind, can we now move back to the main strategy, which we will now look at and debate. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to make a comment and would appreciate a slight change in this draft. On page 12, it says that public services in our borough face massive challenges now and in the future from. And I see extreme and hidden disparities in economic and social experiences. I see nothing about health. And in view of the overview and scrutiny report, which we are considering this evening as well, I would like to see health included in that sentence, because I think disparities have been identified. Thank you, Leader.
Before we move to that amendment, can I ask if anyone else has any other amendments or changes they wish to make? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Leader. This is a great policy here. It's something that we've needed, and it gives a clear direction of travel for Waverley Borough Council. And I can only say congratulations to the draftees, including Councillor Hall. And it's all about place shaping, which is my part of my portfolio. And I welcome it and the commitment shown by this council to the future of Waverley Borough Council. And I'd just like to say well done. Thank you.
Colleagues, anyone else wish to make any comments on the strategy? Right, in that case, we'll move back to Councillor Else's amendment, and we will need, or Councillor Else will need, a seconder. Who's happy to second her proposed change to the wording? Colleagues? Councillor Bolton.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Just one moment and we'll reread the wording back. Mr. Horwood, if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Leader, the amendment before you, the revised resolution, is the Executive recommends to the Council for approval and adoption the draft Corporate Strategy 2018 to 23 with the following amendments. 1. Bullet point 4 on page 2 of the strategy to read extreme and hidden disparities in economic, social and health experiences. 2. Place goal 3. Encourage our residents to improve the quality of recycling and the DEFRA recycling rate to 56% by 2023.
Right, Mr Horwood, thank you very much. Colleagues, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, if we can move to item number 7, which is the Statement of Licensing Policy 2018 to 2023, and that's Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Leader. Our licensing policy has to be reviewed every 5 years, and it is customary for the review to come to the Executive for approval before full Council. I've discussed the matter with the Chairman of Licensing. There is little change. We have had a consultation and received responses which we have noted and included in the revised policy. Page 18 of our agenda refers to the Council continuing to promote all 4 of the key licensing objectives of preventing crime and disorder, public safety, preventing public nuisance, and protecting children from harm. We continue to work in close conjunction with our partners to achieve our aims. Changes in the policy are few and are highlighted in the agenda papers. I commend the revised policy to the Executive. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton, thank you. Colleagues, any comments on that item, or can we move to the recommendation? In that case, if we move to the recommendation, there's one recommendation. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 8 on your agenda is the Leisure Centre investment for Farnham, Godalming and Cranley. The report is pages 53 to 72. And Councillor Else.
Thank you, Leader. As part of the continued improvements of our leisure portfolio, the leisure team commissioned a very helpful piece of work that identified further opportunities for investment and longer-term savings. We hoped that this work would positively contribute in relieving some of the financial challenges that the Council is currently facing. Our leisure contract has been a big success in more than one way, and it's important to remind ourselves of some of these successes. When the contract was first procured, Waverley used to pay over £800,000 per year to the contractor to operate 5 sites. As a result of continued contract negotiation, management action and capital investment, Waverley currently receive a management fee paid by Places for People of £120,000 per annum in 2018, an improvement of £965,000 per annum over the past 10 years. In addition, the leisure contract also creates an annual profit share payment to Waverley, which in 2016-17 exceeded £400,000. The leisure centres not only provide us with financial savings, but also help deliver the Council's health and well-being aspirations. During 2016-17, the leisure centres engaged over 7,000 individuals to deliver sessions to improve health and well-being in the community. These include GP referrals and rehabilitation sessions, weight management, falls prevention courses and health checks. And I hope you would agree that the leisure centre offering is an important part of the services we deliver to our public. It is important to continue investing in our facilities and improve what we are offering in order to meet the emerging public health agenda, keep up with trends and competitors, and to accommodate the demand that the increasing population within Waverley will create. The outcomes of this detailed piece of work, including the business case for each option, are presented in this report, and I would like to encourage you to consider and support it. In summary, what the report proposes is that Waverley funds an extension at Farnham Leisure Centre to incorporate a soft play area and a climbing wall, fund the extension of Godalming Leisure Centre to incorporate a bigger gym, an additional studio and more changing rooms, and this proposal also includes a car park extension, which is essential to achieve before any work takes place. And finally, to consider funding a new leisure centre in Cranley to replace the current one, with more work needing to take place to explore all possibilities in terms of location. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Else, thank you very much. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Leader. I very much support this item. This is good news for the residents of Farnham and Godalming, who will get £3.2 million invested in their leisure facilities. This money is predominantly coming from the Brightwells cash and shows that Waverley is reinvesting in its services for its residents. Cranley is a more complex project, potentially involving a complete rebuild of the facility. For this, extensive consultation and planning will have to be undertaken. Waverley is committing today to a multi-million-pound investment in leisure facilities in Cranley, and we hope to be able to report back to Council on progress as this process moves forward. These three projects represent the beginning of a wider engagement and increasing investment in our facilities right across the borough, delivering on our commitment to ensure that Waverley becomes a centre of excellence for community-focused sports and leisure. I urge you all to support the item.
Councillor Hall, thank you very much. Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Leader. I won't say a great deal. I just wanted to say I'm delighted to see there's a real desire to provide leisure facilities in Cranley which are fit for purpose. I think that's a really good news story, and I'm just delighted we have that desire to achieve this. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say that this is a clear endorsement of the policy which the Council has used for some time of investing in facilities in order to reap income. And as Councillor Else said, the large amount of money which we were spending originally and are now have a net inflow of cash shows the effectiveness of that. I'm very much in favour of continuing the process of investment, particularly in areas such as the soft play area and so on in Farnham, where these are facilities which are not available in the other providers' facilities within the area. So this is new departures allowing for a wider use of the leisure facilities.
Colleagues, anyone else want to comment on this? Well, I have to say, and I would be slightly biased because I had the portfolio a few years ago when we were doing a lot of the work, the last round of works on the leisure centres. I think this is great. I think it's really exciting. It's really excellent news for our residents and the wider community. We have said that with the forthcoming Brightwells project, once we had that money, we would start to really make sure that we were spending it wisely, that we were investing it, and that the wider community in Farnham and in the borough were really starting to benefit from that. And that can be seen very clearly with the announcement on the fantastic proposals for Farnham, with the climbing wall, the soft play, and the other proposals for the leisure centre there, with the next stages to really enhancing Godalming Leisure Centre, that when it was first built, and I remember literally from almost day one, it was at capacity, and it's superb to see that we finally got funding and we can really move on with that. Because it is a superb leisure centre. And we recognise that Cranley really does need a new leisure centre. We really want to find a way to move that forward. We recognise there's going to be a lot of work involved, as Councillor Hall said. There's going to need to be a lot of work across the borough, but certainly in the Cranley area with the parish, with the residents, and with a number of other key stakeholders to again find a way that we can really move that forward. But to the points raised by Councillor Ells and made by Councillor Hall, this administration is really committed to delivering that. It will be an excellent long-term investment for our residents, for their health and well-being, and also in terms of income generation. So a real win-win all round, and I think an excellent, really good news story that we're able to come out with this evening. So I'm very, very pleased to see this. I'd like to thank everybody who's worked so hard so far on this, because a lot of work has gone on with officers and members looking and just getting it to this stage so that we now have outlines of where we're going and we have a strategy. And I'd like to pass my thanks on to everyone involved, and I think we have really exciting times ahead of us. So on that note, colleagues, there are 5 recommendations before you under this item tonight. Can I ask, are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. If we now move to item 9, which is the overview and scrutiny review on health inequalities and factors affecting health in Waverley. The report itself is pages 73 to 164. We have some speakers on that, so if I ask the speakers to speak first on that, that's Councillor MacLeod, followed by Councillor Mrs Ellis, and then I'll come to the portfolio holder. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Leader. I'm here on behalf of the Community Wellbeing ONS Committee to recommend that the Executive should endorse the Health Inequalities Report, and in particular its recommendations to the Executive. The production of this report, which the Committee is rightly proud of, was a great team effort, and I must first of all pay tribute to all who took part. The scrutiny officers not only recommended this topic to the committee, but did a great job in organising task group meetings and arranging the necessary witnesses for the task group meetings. A wide range of health professionals and officers from both Surrey and Waverley gave valuable evidence, and the councillors in the task group played their part by asking questions and carefully assessing the evidence. Finally, the scrutiny officers and democratic service officers drafted the report for the task group and full committee to review and endorse. I have to say there was some concern and even scepticism at the committee when we started that this task was just too big for us as our first task group, and you've seen the size of the report. It would have been too big actually without the dedication and commitment, in particular of the scrutiny officers, and I feel that this report demonstrated the importance of this role to the success of ONS committees. In terms of the report itself, it's far too wide-ranging for me to even summarise it here, so I will simply recommend that all the executive members who have not yet done so, and I do recommend that you're very busy people, should read the whole report and not just the executive summary. I will confine my remarks and report to 3 key points. The impetus for this review was data from the Public Health Profile for Waverley 2016 that reported that the disparity in life expectancy between the least and most deprived areas within Waverley was 9.5 years for women and 5.7 years for men. This is an issue that we have to tackle. I'm sure that we do care equally for all of our residents, but we really have to demonstrate that we do and try to do something about this. There is no single cause or single solution, but this report advises a range of ways in which you can improve this situation and other public health issues, not just for the disadvantaged group, but for the population as a whole. Perhaps the most surprising thing that we all learned in this exercise was that clinical care from the NHS only accounts for 20% of the factors which determine public health, whereas the responsibilities of councils influence up to 70% of these factors. This seems to be largely unrecognised by central government and thus seriously underfunded. In the case of the borough councils such as Waverley, planning, housing, air quality monitoring and leisure facilities will all have major impact on public health. At the county level, adult and child social care, education and highways are amongst the key factors. Of all the recommendations that we made, perhaps the most important is the recommendation that we make to Waverley that it should adopt a health in all policies known as a HIAP approach and advocate this approach to all place-based partners. Looking ahead, the committee intends to monitor how the executive take this report forward, but we also intend to promote it to other parties that we've made recommendations to, Surrey County Council and the clinical commissioning groups. We would also intend to promote it to Jeremy Hunt, who our ex-health minister, who sadly from this point of view has now moved on to be the new Boris Johnson. And good luck to him in that. So that concludes my remarks, Leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Mrs Ellis.
Thank you, Leader. I wholeheartedly endorse everything said by Councillor MacLeod regarding the importance of the report on health inequalities across the Borough of Waverley and thank him for his excellent chairmanship of the group. My grateful thanks also go to Democratic Services and to the many representatives from external agencies and organisations that came to speak to us and who so carefully shared with us their knowledge and their understanding of their specialised field. But I would also like to totally agree and offer special thanks to the Waverley scrutiny officers for their endless support, their encouragement and their expertise. As you will have noted from the size of the report, this was a very significant piece of work that I feel has given me, in my capacity as a borough councillor, a greater insight and a better understanding of the issues that might well be faced by many, if not all of us, at one time or another during our life, and when we might, or we would probably, benefit from a greater understanding. Being so involved in the report and benefiting from some very detailed information on the different problems faced by perhaps too many people in our borough, which is always thought of as beautiful and comfortable, if not wealthy, has confirmed to me that we share a responsibility for the whole population and their poor health, inequalities in so many areas, and restricted life expectancy must be addressed. I'm confident that with your agreement and support, the findings in the report will be very helpful to our officers and will have a hugely beneficial impact on the work of the Borough Council as it carries out well over 100 and ever-increasing numbers of services. However, I do not believe that alone and in isolation, Waverley Borough Council can improve all of the inequalities and the health problems that exist across the borough, but I am sure that by carefully identifying the issues, as we have done, and working in partnership with others, we can help in so many important areas, such as improving health and well-being of our residents and reducing perhaps stresses on the health services. Following the project, which, if I may say so, I also believe is an excellent identification of the benefit and overview and scrutiny task and finish groups, and is indicative of the enthusiasm from members who really do want to be involved. I now have an even greater admiration for our officers working with residents and in the communities, and a far better understanding of the complexity of their work and the difficulties they face. Very briefly, and if I may, yesterday I attended the social prescribing in Waverley workshop, and in this respect, I believe that the report before you couldn't be more timely, and it will be hugely helpful to the Borough Council as it considers the implications of this government-sponsored and countrywide project that sets out to significantly improve the overall health and well-being of all our residents. Thank you, Leader, and I commend this report.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. If I can move now to the portfolio holder, Councillor Els, and then I'll come to Councillor Edwards, who is raising his hand and gesturing.
Thank you, Leader. Well, firstly, I would like to thank the Community Wellbeing Committee for an excellent report. It's in such depth, and it is the most in-depth review of health inequalities in Surrey that has ever been undertaken. And as we strengthen our partnership links, it's a really good time to look at how we can work together with our partners to improve the health and well-being of our residents. The services which we provide are important determinants of health and well-being, particularly mental health, housing, older people's services, leisure and arts services, community safety, and many others. It will be important to work closely with health colleagues and other partners to focus services on those most in need. The report makes a number of recommendations which are split into 4 parts. Recommendation 1 to 7 on page 83 are for this executive to consider. And there are also a number of tasks recommended for Waverley service managers to undertake, and these are contained in an action plan on pages 86 to 90. The remaining recommendations on pages 83 to 85 are directed at the clinical commissioning groups and Surrey County Council. And if these are agreed, I would like to recommend that I will write to the appropriate people to request a meeting to see how we can take the findings of this report forward. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Els, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Leader. I wasn't initially going to say anything tonight because the amount of work and the good stuff in here is really outstanding. However, I have to wear my place shaping hat here, and it says, for instance, on executive summary on page 78, on item 1, oblique 4, the evidence is pointed to no one particular reason for the disparity in life expectancy, fine, okay, but showed that the clustering of poorer socio-economic conditions, okay, affected it adversely. And that's the theme throughout this document, but it doesn't say anything about investment and talking to businesses and finding that money to address the problems, because if you've got no money, you've got no well-being. Okay, you've got to have money, and it said this council will invest in our borough and ensure, and we will meet businesses and talk to businesses and develop an economic strategy that will deliver better health for our residents. And that needs to be seen in here somewhere and said in here somewhere, and you know, it needs to be taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Deaners.
Thank you, Leader. Just a very quick point, which is page 127 of our papers, which is 53 of the report. It's Tennessee and Estates, and it talks about paragraph 3.88, the difficulties linking up with other agencies and social services and the mental health team. And then the recommendation talks about recognising the work the Waverley Borough Council teams do, etc. But it doesn't say how we're going to address this problem that we can't seem to get information from Surrey County Council mental health teams. It could be lost somewhere within these papers because it is an extensive report. But I just think we do need to make sure it's been raised. How is it going to be addressed? Thank you.
Point taken, and we'll note that and come back to that in a second. Councillor Mrs King.
Thank you very much, Leader. I really welcome this report. I think it's a great piece of work, and in annals of history, I remember sitting on the health and wellbeing partnership we had, and I'm sorry it demised, but they've come a long way since then. As you can see from pages roughly 122 onwards, housing has a large element that comes in here. It's our everyday work, it's our bread and butter. It isn't just about putting a roof over somebody's head. It's about caring for our tenants and helping them on their way should they need it. But as you can see, and as Councillor Dean has rightly mentioned, it is the problem of actually being able to work with our other partners, not just mental health, children's services as well as another particular area of concern. And I really welcome anything the portfolio holder can do to improve the actions we receive from them. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak, or can I summarise on this? Right. So a really, really good piece of work here. But it's only a good piece of work if we can also now start to follow up on some of the actions and the recommendations. And we've got some 25 recommendations and then a number of very detailed actions. And to a certain extent, it's not just Waverley now, to move back to the point made earlier by Councillor Ellis and a number of others who've spoken. We are in the hands of a number of other key partners and stakeholders here. As an executive, we had a really good briefing from a Surrey County Council officer who came and spoke and took us through this as an executive team, which has really helped us to start to understand this in a lot more detail, which is really helpful. I think to pick up on some of the points that have been raised by other executive colleagues this evening, especially from Councillor Edwards and Councillor Mrs King, it would be excellent for the portfolio holder to actually write to Surrey as you expressed, but I think what would also be helpful is if we could ask if you could go away and liaise with the officers, Councillor Ells, and look at some of the points that have been raised this evening and incorporate those into letters that may need to go to other organisations, i.e. possibly the CCGs and so forth as well, so that we can start to really raise the profile here and do all we can, whilst they might not always be issues and areas that we can directly influence. What we can do is start to raise the profile and lobby far harder to actually also help to get these issues and concerns addressed. So would you be happy to liaise with colleagues on the items that have been raised? And I think Ms Cameron's been taking some notes as well, so we can start to pull that piece of work together. Is that agreeable? Thank you. In that case, unless anyone else would like to speak on that item, can I move to the recommendation? Yep. In that case, there's one recommendation, and that is that the executive consider the report, agrees the recommendations contained within it, and will move forward on that basis. Is that agreed? Agreed. Superb, thank you. And again, thank you to the Scrutiny Committee and everyone else involved, because it is a very wide-ranging, far-reaching report. If I can move on to item 10, which is the overview and scrutiny review of housing design standards for new council homes. Colleagues, that report is pages 165 to 222 on your agenda. And again, we have two speakers. Councillor Mrs Townsend, who's going to introduce the report, and then Adrian Waller, who's chair of our tenants panel. So if I can ask Councillor Mrs Townsend to take the item and introduce it on behalf of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Unfortunately, Councillor Seaborn, who was the chairman of the task group, couldn't be here this evening to present this, but I'm delighted to do it on behalf of the task group. Waverley Borough Council last published standards for council house design in 2014. Agenda item 10 this evening asks the Executive to consider the report of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Task Group that has been looking at the numerous issues to be addressed in a scheduled update of these design standards. If you are happy with the content, then you are asked to agree the report's recommendations. The task group comprised 4 members and a member of Waverley Tenants Panel, working in partnership with officers from Scrutiny, Democratic Services and the Housing Development Team over a 6-month period, consulting external experts when necessary and visiting a number of our properties and talking to tenants. As with the previous report that was presented this evening, it is a very long document. It was essential to fully record all of the evidence the task group considered and how it reached the conclusions and recommendations. You may not have had the opportunity to read the report cover to cover, but as long as you have looked at the first 3 sections and used the remaining material to explain any points of concern, you should be equipped to address this evening's recommendations. The report's recommendations will underpin a set of revised design standards which should be completed by early autumn. In conducting the review, members of the task group consistently challenged officers to ensure that the new design standards are current in terms of legislation and good building practice, properties to be constructed using the new standards will blend with market housing, and any improvements to the standards have minimal incremental cost impact, thus enabling the council to deliver as many new properties as possible for the available budget. The review has looked to the future and sought to include good levels of provision for existing technology, as well as recognising the need to accommodate emerging technology such as electric car charging points. Wherever possible, flexibility has been built into the standards to allow for future adaptation of our properties to accommodate the changing and differing needs of our tenants. Improvements to design aspects have been identified by consulting with residents and through site visits to a variety of properties, including recently completed and properties under construction. These visits were used to sense check the decisions that have been made. For example, we wanted to know what the proposed minimum bedroom sizes would look like in reality, how much garden space is appropriate, and how much storage space a family really needs. We also wanted to make the best use of available land by considering development of roof spaces. We believe the new standards will incorporate all the changes in regulations that have been enacted since the current version was written, and this includes the initial material produced from the findings of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. There is one item that is still to be finalised, and that is determining if the aspirational targets for reduction in CO2 emissions are financially viable. The group sought to replicate London's target of a 35% reduction. However, this involved an element of emissions trading, which we consider is too complex for Waverley to undertake. A further short assessment is underway and is due to be completed at the end of July to assess the cost of the 35% reduction against what reduction could be achieved through the affordable measures using the Fabric First priorities outlined in the report. By adopting the recommendations, we believe that the next generation of Waverley-built properties will be even better, without having cost implications that would reduce the number of homes that we build. The task group members are all excited to see the new standards implemented in the building of Oxford Ridge Phase C, and are hoping that the project will be the legacy of a period of hard work and productive collaboration by members and officers. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Townsend, thank you very much. Can I move to Mr. Waller, if you'd like to speak on behalf of the tenants panel? That would be really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. As a Waverley tenant, I'd like to give a tenant's perspective of the revised housing design standard. I'm very passionate about housing and appreciate the importance and need of well-designed properties for tenants. The new design standard will support a positive effect on the community and improve the well-being of tenants' lives. The possibility of using the loft area for living space is added value. This can make a home expand with a family rather than moving on. Future-proofing new builds with electric car charging points is excellent, and internet and TV points in bedrooms will make tenants' lives more comfortable. Garden sizes were put into perspective. Tenants appreciate manageable gardens, and builders can fit in more properties into the area. Inputting a tenant's voice was very important in this new design standard, and working with councillors and officers was meaningful and fun. I'm looking forward to seeing these standards implemented at Oxford Ridge Site C. Thank you, Leader.
Mr Waller, thank you. My thanks and that of the executive, both to the scrutiny committee and also to the tenants panel who give us such a valuable sort of on-the-ground insight and an excellent check and balance for us. So thank you for that, and thank you for your comments and your input. Councillor Mrs King.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. My thanks have to go to the members of the Housing ONS Task Group. It's a very thorough report, as you can see and you can gather. And my thanks particularly as well to Adrian Waller, who gave up a huge amount of his own time and always does to support the tenants of Waverley. The report actually held no surprises for me, so maybe my aspirations match theirs. So that's a pretty good thing, I reckoned. Waverley already builds homes to a very high standard of design, construction and safety, but I believe we can always do better and stay within budget. I support the recommendations, which are a bit complex, so they're on page 173 to 177, and I look forward very much to adopting these in all of our new builds. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor King, thank you very much. I noticed that there were several references to the next phase and build out at Oxford Ridge. So I think we all look forward to seeing that coming forward. Councillor Bolton, you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Leader. Just briefly, I would like to echo Mr Waller's remarks. I'm very pleased these standards will inform the design proposals for Site C at Oxford Ridge in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you very much for letting me come back, Leader. The one thing I did forget to say was that it was a site visit to Oxford Ridge to look at the new properties that were already under construction that inspired the ONS to set up this task group in the first place. So it worked quite well.
Good. Well, I know we've got an awful lot happening in the borough within our housing portfolio at the moment. So I think this is really timely, and as you say, it should work very well, not just with Oxford Ridge, but with other schemes that are coming forward. Colleagues, unless anyone else wishes to say anything, can we move to the recommendations for this report, please? Are those recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And once again, my thanks both to the tenants panel, if you could pass my thanks on, or our thanks on to all the members of the panel, and those on the scrutiny working group who weren't able to attend this evening. But thank you very much, Councillor Townsend. Right, moving on to item 11, which is the performance management report for quarter 4. And again, a really good report which provides an analysis of the council's performance for the fourth quarter 2017-18, and really also helps us by providing an update on the service plan objectives across the main service areas. In general, Waverley services performed very well in the fourth quarter and throughout 2017-18. over 72% of indicators performed on target throughout the year, and some 83% of service plan objectives were successfully achieved. It's good to note that we had very good performance being achieved in housing in terms of the responsive repairs, which I think is something that everyone can relate to, and it's really good to see that that aspect has really improved over the last few years. Homelessness and the number of days taken to actually re-let our void properties have also improved, and the new 5-year housing strategy is also now in place. So again, some really good points here to draw out. We can see much more in terms of further improvements that are taking place in the benefits services, following the implementation of the business transformation project led by Mr. Vickers' team, which has been really successful, and that is now rolling out into the revenues and benefits team as well, into the revenues team rather. So again, we're looking at similar wins coming forward there, and though that has been exceptionally successful for us, but also for the users of that service. Good performance generally with planning applications being processed ahead of target, and obviously a big win here and a big factor has been the adoption of the local plan, which has really given us a much better framework to work to overall. Now, we'll come on to this a bit later as well, but the preparatory work for the tender of the waste contract has been successfully completed, and a number of preferred options have been identified, which we'll be considering, as I say, slightly later on this evening. The committees themselves have reviewed the indicator set and would like to recommend changes for the year ahead. I think that's great. I'm really pleased with the suggestions from them. These recommendations are set out on page 5 rather, of our agenda, and on page 232 of your very detailed report, which I'm sure you've read cover to cover. So recommendation 5, as I say, is the target change for residual waste, which the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee have endorsed. And recommendation 6 is the inclusion of the new housing performance indicators, which again have been endorsed by the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the committees for their comments and observations. Colleagues, before we move to the recommendations, have you got any other comments that you want to make on this item? Councillor Bolton first, and then Councillor Ells.
Thank you, Chairman. It was you almost preempted me. It was it's concerning the tonnage of residual waste. I'm very grateful for the Scrutiny Committee's feedback and support for our revised target. Thank you.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Leader. I also am grateful to the ONS for suggesting, because it was my prompting, I think, recording the prevention and relief duties that we discharge under the Homelessness Reduction Act. I thought it was rather pointless actually saying how many people in the borough we had who were actually living in accommodation because they were that we provided because they were homeless, but we had no record anywhere of actually saying how many people have actually gone through the door that we've actually saved from being homeless. So that was the purpose of that one. Thank you, and I welcome it.
Councillor King, thank you. Any other colleagues wish to speak on that item? In that case, we have got 6 recommendations under item 11. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We will now move to some matters to be heard in exempt. So I'd like to move into exempt. Executive, is that agreed?
Agreed.
In that case, can I ask that, pursuant to Procedural Rule 20, and accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the grounds that it is likely in the nature of the business being transacted or the nature of proceedings that if members of the public